Good day everyone, my name is Rainier Sucgang from BSED English 1A. Today I am discussing about the learner-centered teaching, a paradigm shift in education. So these lectures explore the foundations and characteristics of learner-centered teaching, highlighting its shift from the traditional teacher-centered approach. We will delve into the philosophical underpinnings of both models, examine supporting research, and discuss the challenges and strategies of managing these transitions. Now, let's talk about the learner-centered teaching, foundations, and characteristics. So, learner-centered teaching is an educational approach that prioritizes the needs, interests, and learning styles of individual students. So, it emphasizes active participation, independent inquiry, and student-driven learning, empowering students to take ownership of their educational journey. So, the learner-centered teaching manifests in several cases of characteristics. So, number one is active participation. So, students are actively engaged in the learning process, going beyond passive listening to participate in discussions, problem solving, and project-based activities. So, number two is independent inquiry. So, students are encouraged to ask questions, explore topics in depth, and conduct independent research, fostering critical thinking and self-directed learning. So number three is student-driven learning. So students have some control over the learning path, choosing topics, selecting learning activities, and setting goals, promoting personalized learning experiences. And next is collaborative learning. So students work together in groups, sharing ideas, supporting each other, and learning from diverse perspectives. And last is reflective practice. So students are encouraged to reflect on their learning process, identify strengths and weaknesses, and develop strategies for improvement. Now, let's move on to the next topic, which is the paradigm shift from teacher-centered to learner-centered teaching. So, this is all about the philosophical perspective. So, let's talk about the first philosophical perspective, which is the essentialism. So, essentialism focuses on fundamental knowledge and skills, transmitting a core body of knowledge deemed essential for all students, emphasizes a structured curriculum and standardized assessment. So, like for example, an 8th grade algebra class where the teacher lectures on solving quadratic equations, providing step-by-step instructions and numerous practice problems. So students are assessed through frequent quizzes and a final exam focused on procedural fluency and accurate application of formula. So the curriculum strictly adheres to a set of predetermined learning objectives. So the essentialism is effective for building a strong foundation in core subjects but may not foster creativity or critical thinking. It implemented rigidly. So next is perennialism. Perennialism emphasizes enduring truths and critical thinking skills, focusing on timeless ideas and principles applicable across cultures and time periods, values, classic texts, and philosophical inquiry. So like for example, an 11th grade English literature class where students engage in in-depth discussions of Shakespeare's Hamlet, analyzing its themes of revenge, morality, and human nature through close reading and critical analysis. So the focus is on understanding the enduring relevance of the play ideas and exploring their connections to contemporary issues. There is less emphasis on plot summary and more on philosophical interpretation. So, the perennialism cultivates deep understanding and critical thinking skills but may lack contemporary relevance and practical application. So next is progressivism. Progressivism emphasizes active learning and student-centered inquiry, believing that students learn best through experience and problem-solving, values real-world application and relevance. So like for example, a 5th grade science class where students work in small groups to design and conduct experiments to test the effects of different fertilizers on plant growth. They collect data, analyze the results, and present their findings to the class. So the teacher acts as a facilitator, guiding the students' inquiry and helping them to develop their problem-solving skills. So the curriculum is flexible and adapts to student interest. So progressivism promotes active learning and engagement but may lack structures and consistency in curriculum delivery. So next is humanism. So humanism prioritizes individual growth and self-expression, focusing on the development of the whole person intellectually, emotionally, and socially. Value students' autonomy and choice. So like for example, a high school art class where students express themselves creatively through various art forms, with the teacher providing individual support and encouragement. So the focus is on self-discovery and personal expressions with the curriculum tailored to each student's unique strengths and interests. Assessment is based on individual growth and artistic explorations rather than standardized criteria. So humanism fosters individual growth and self-expressions but may not adequately prepare students for standardized testing or rigorous academic challenges. And so last is constructivism. Constructivism emphasizes collaborative knowledge construction, believing that students actively build their understanding through experience, interactions, and collaboration. Values active participation and social learning. So like for example, a 7th grade history class where students work collaboratively to research and present a historical event using a variety of primary and secondary sources. They engage in debates and discussions, constructing their own understanding of the event through interaction and collaboration. The teacher acts as a facilitator, guiding the learning process and encouraging students to critically evaluate different perspectives. So, constructivism encourages collaborative learning and knowledge construction, but may require significant teacher facilitation and careful planning to ensure effective learning outcomes. So these 5 educational philosophies, essentialism, perennialism, progressivism, humanism, and constructivism, offer diverse approaches to learning, each with strengths depending on context. Modern education often blend these approaches, and I hope you learned something from my topic. So now let's move on to the next reporter. Thank you.
I am Angel S. EBOL, and for my topic, I am going to discuss the resistance to change, managing the shift. It is human nature to counteract any changes, but change is inevitable. The reason why people resist to change is because it's not an easy transition and there is the fear of the unknown. Students resist learner-centered approaches for a variety of reasons. The 4 most common reasons students resist learner-centered approaches are: first, learner-centered approaches are more work. Second, learner-centered approaches are more threatening. Third, learner-centered approaches involve losses. And for the last one, learner-centered approaches may be beyond students. Learner-centered approaches are more work. These approaches are more work for faculty, who now face complex instructional design issues. But the students resist because they quickly realize that this means much more work for them as well. Resistance that is based on increased amount of work is resistance for the right reason from the teacher's perspectives. It is simply that more work, learner-centered teaching means students have to do more work. It's not just about listening to the teacher anymore. They have to read more, think more, and do more activities. This can feel like a lot of extra effort. Learner-centered approaches are more threatening. Students also resist these approaches because they are afraid. The teacher has opened Pandora's box and let out all sorts of unknown and unfamiliar policies, practices, assignments, and expectations not regularly encountered in other classes. The fear becomes a major anxiety for students who face learning tests without confidence in themselves as learners. In some students' resistance is more about self-perceptions than it does about the approach. So here, the learner-centered are being scared. New ways of learning can be scary. Students might not know how to do new things, and they might worry about failing. It's like stepping out of their comfort zone and into something unfamiliar. Learner-centered approaches involve losses. Clause 1994 points out that whatever you move from one level of understanding to another, something is lost. We as teachers need to remember that growth creates a sense of loss in students. The loss of certainty that has sustained them and been a refuge in an increasingly complex and confusing world. These approaches take our students to new places where the responsibility and ownership for what does and does not happen is much more obviously theirs. Some students' resistance is about loss and longing for the simpler way this used to be. They may understand intellectually that the new approaches are good for them and foster their personal development. But the feeling of loss is an emotional one that sometimes manifests itself as resistance. So it's like missing the old ways. Sometimes students miss the old way of learning where the teachers did most of the work. They might feel like they are losing control or that they are not good enough to handle new responsibilities. Learner-centered approaches may be beyond students. If teachers are unfair to students and unethical or ask students to engage in ethically compromised behavior, then we should hope that students would resist. Despite the past that we may do so at some personal risk, most faculty are not unethical or unfair with students. But the learner-centered techniques selected may ask students to take approaches, complete work employing methods, or use particular structures that are beyond students' abilities to handle. So students are too hard. Sometimes the new learning activities are just too difficult for some students. It's like being asked to run a marathon before you even know how to start. They might feel like they are not smart enough or that the teacher is being unfair.
Good day, Coach Jude. I am SHERHAN JACINTO from BSED English 1A. I will discuss to you the two topics. First is the faculty resistance. Faculty's resistance. Students are not only ones who resist this approach. Some colleagues and administrators will object as well. The resistance will teach us disheartening. It may be professionally threatening too. As a student, it is important to analyze the basis of the resistance on what grounds they object. Then consider how a faculty member committed to the learner-centered approaches and anxious to implement them can deal with resistance in this level. Here are some examples. Teacher Maria wants to implement the learner-centered approach in her classroom, where students work in groups to solve real-world problems. However, her colleagues, Teacher Maria, objects these approaches, citing a concern that students do not learn the necessary content. The approaches is too chaotic and unstructured.
everyone, I am SHERMALYN KARUS and I'll be discussing a topic about the dimensions of learner-centered teaching. So according to Rainier 2002, there are 5 practices or dimensions that need to change to achieve learning-centered teaching, such as the function of content, the role of the instructor, who should take responsibility for learning, the purposes and processes of assessment, and lastly is the balance of power. So let's begin in the function of content. In addition to build a knowledge base, the contents facilitate students to build an appreciation for value of content, build discipline-specific learning methodologies, practice using inquiries or ways of thinking in the discipline, learn to solve real problems, students engage in most of the contents to make it their own, students make meaning out of the content. Content can help students develop an organized framework or way to learn in their discipline. And content is framed so that students see how it can be applied in the future. So number 2 is the role of the instructor. The instructor creates an environment that fosters students' learning, accommodates different learning styles, explicitly align objectives, teaching methods, and assessments consistently, utilize multiple teaching techniques appropriate for students' learning goals, designs activities in which students interact with the materials, the teacher, and each other. And lastly is to motivate students to learn intrinsically. Number 3, who should take responsibility for learning? The student should take responsibility. Often, it is the faculty who does because we adapt our teaching to fit requests or needs of the students through detailed notes or study guides. So, consequences of faculty taking responsibility of learning. Students remain passive. Students do not gain confidence in their ability to learn on their own, yet a common goal of higher education is for the graduates to be self-directed learners who can continue to learn the rest of their lives. Faculty needs to teach students how to take responsibility for learning. There are specific skills that can be taught, practiced, and mastered. And number 4, the purposes and processes of the assessment. Assessment is integrated within the learning process. Instructors give information feedback for the purpose of fostering improvement. Students have multiple opportunities to assess themselves and their peers, and students can learn from their mistakes and then demonstrate mastery. And instructors encourage students to justify their answers when they do not agree with those of the instructors. And instructors and students manually agree on the time frame for feedbacks and always follow the time frame for providing feedback. And lastly is instructors uses authentic assessment throughout the course. And number 5 is the balance of power. So learner-centered approaches empowers students to take responsibility and to share in some of the decisions about their courses. Students can have some say over some policies or the deadlines. Allows students some grading options once students begins to gain some controls over the course. They will engage more in the course and will learn more. That could be all about my topic. Thank you.